Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinzler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm embracing the fall season. I love it.
It's kind of nice, isn't it? I mean, it's just we're starting to see the changes in the plants, changes in the yard, changes in the trees.
It is, and I'm enjoying the vegetable garden because this fall, of course, is a wonderful harvest time. Now, I haven't dug our potatoes yet. You know, that's digging for buried treasure. I can't wait. And, of course, the squash, I also let them get a little frost on the vine. And so I'm anticipating some nice vegetable harvest. That's why I'm looking forward to visiting with our guest today.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking with Ryan Nitschke. But before that, speaking of vegetables and things like that, I got to ask you, Don, do you know how much room you should give a fungi to grow?
How much room should you give a fungi to grow? I don't know.
As much room as possible.
As always, your delivery was very good, John.
And in on the rim shot there was Ryan Nitschke. He's our special guest. Multiple James Beard Award nominee and best known as a local chef who helped build a restaurant empire with his business partner, Nikki Ness Berglund, based out of Luna Fargo on South University Drive. But your other restaurants include Soul Avenue Kitchen in Moorhead, Nova Eatery at Fargo Brewing, and most recently, I'm going to get the name. Is it Mangata or Mangata? Mangata Raw and Mangata Wine and Raw Bar and Unicorn Park Foodery, both in Brewhalla. Did I get all of it? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of stuff. Yeah,
but you've done it. You guys have been so busy, and you've really helped. There's been a lot of other great places that have opened up, but this has really helped making Fargo a food destination, and it's certainly a more interesting place to eat than it was 15, 20 years ago.
And I think that's our whole philosophy is, what do we want to eat? So that's kind of our driving passion, is like what we want to cook and what we want to eat, the places we would want to go to. So that's why we keep opening more places. There's other great places to go to as well, but
you keep finding things that you want to eat differently. Or you want to, different foods, I should say, that you want to eat. And then before that, you'd worked at the Hotel Donaldson. You were there for a while, and you worked some other places around town too, right?
Yeah. Many places around town. Got my first job at Dairy Queen.
Excellent.
Of course, at 14. Yeah, but yeah, I worked at plenty of places around town. Got to spend a lot of time at the Hodo. It was kind of a gift being able to be there and to learn from so many other cooks there and be a part of a place for the first time that believes in like local food, working with farmers, and that's where I got introduced to like local farmers and ordering stuff from them and using all their the fresh vegetables that grow in season. Yeah,
that kind of farm to table model, is that what they call it?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about a garden. Did you grow up with a family garden, or when did you get interested in the idea of the growing food and then eating that food? That kind of the whole thing.
Basically, at the edge of our backyard growing up, we had a large community garden, so we were able to carve out a little patch of that, and there was always lots of neighbors that were there growing stuff there as well, and it was kind of just fun as a kid. Like maybe you're not supposed to, but I would run up and grab a carrot right out of the ground and dust it off and take a bite out of it. And it's fun as a kid seeing that, just like to have grab that snack right out of the ground. It was kind of like when you're young, or it feels like a kind of like a marvel. Like you just kind of like, wow, like stuff just growing right here. And then I remember we always go into the strawberry fields, like pick your own in West Fargo. That was always a good time. We do that as a family, and we gather and all these. You just sit there and eat them and see how many you can fill up. And
I remember that pick your own strawberry.
I wish they still did that.
Yeah, I wish they did too. And your experience growing up as a kid, those experiences with gardening fresh vegetables, those stick with you your whole life. And I mean, that's what caught me into gardening.
And yeah, that the berry patches, there was a couple around the lakes area, around DL, I remember, but it's been about 10 years since they've ceased doing it. I went out and I picked raspberries one day, and I thought it was great, but it's also kind of hard work when you're looking to pick a full bucket or something like that. But it's great in the garden just to go out and kind of pick a handful. And we talked about this last week about different berries to grow as an edible landscape in your yard, and just how much fun that is just to be able to pluck off something every once in a while and have something to eat. And now you said you recently moved and you haven't set up a garden yet, but you've got herbs. What are some kind of herbs that are must-haves for you?
Chives pretty much can go in any great complement to everything. I mean, I love fresh herbs. I think they are one of the easiest things I've been able to grow, me and my wife. So, and they add so much to each dish, more than you would think. So just this little, like, not much effort adds a ton. So, I mean, rosemary and thyme will go lovely together. Throw it on some roasted potatoes, throw it on or you can grill the potatoes or rub it on some meat. It just goes great with beef or pork. I mean, like I said, chives. I love putting chives in just simple egg scramble in the morning. And
they're so easy to grow. It's a good hardy perennial. You can plant one by your back door. Yep. And so great.
But you can even grow them inside over winter, can't you?
Oh yeah.
They're
they
fairly
can be
easy.
grown in a window in a pot as well.
Yep. And then we got some mint that it's pretty dang easy to grow mint, I found out. You steal a little bit from my parents' backyard and put it in our backyard, and soon you have this bush of mint. So
it's probably harder to get rid of than it is, harder to grow. It's
so when you check the plant tag and it says vigorous, yes, that's a key word
that's quite
there.
Right. What do you do? What do you do with the mint?
Well, a good portion of the mint they used to use at the restaurants if we need it for anything. So, like any dishes we put in or cocktails, comes from my backyard basically. That mint. Otherwise, at home we love putting it in fresh.
Do you dry it or use it fresh or both?
Typically fresh. But.
And then do you muddle it?
Yeah, muddle it or give it a little slap.
And the idea there is that you're kind of you're bruising it, you're letting out some of the
you're expressing it and letting the flavors out, and it's just fun to add to a couple of cocktails.
I learned a new term. Say that again.
Muddle?
That term, yeah.
Muddling?
I've never heard that term.
Muddling, I learned it from, I think, cocktails, and usually it's you put it in the bottom of a glass, right? You put the mint in the bottom of a glass, and you'd have like a wooden spoon handle or something like that to kind of...
Yeah, you're just kind of muddling it.
Awesome.
Weird, but yeah.
I suppose it's not quite mortar and pestle because it's not so heavy and you're not grinding it.
But similar concept, yeah.
I've learned a new word today.
Yeah, it's a good day already, isn't it?
There you go.
What have you do you use mint in like other things? Like I know some people will throw it in rice sometimes. Some different.
Occasionally we'll make like a pesto. If we got whatever we got laying around with some garlic or some nuts and some maybe some Parmesan or something, like some olive oil, quick little pesto or something like that, just in addition to a dish, or throw in a salad. But
when you were talking about chives, do you think, like maybe Don too, maybe you've noticed this, you've been around a little bit longer and gardening a little bit longer. I mean, chives have always been there, but it seems like, and I'm not sure if it's because of all the chive on memes and t-shirts, but chives really seems to have kind of grown in popularity, and you see it more now as listed as a menu item, or not in and of itself, but as an ingredient. You see it now more than you did, again, 15, 20 years ago. Do you see that, or has it always been there?
I definitely exactly what you're saying. I mean, I knew what chives were before I got into like the little bit of like the hodo or higher end dining, but like most of the restaurants that I worked at never had any chives if they had fresh herbs. It wasn't until then where it's like I got this array of fresh herbs and I'm learning how to use them. So I think it definitely hasn't been like a resurgence of.
Now with fresh herbs, obviously we're heading into a season where things are not going to be as fresh unless you grow them inside and unless you grow them. But do you do anything to dry herbs at your home?
We don't do a whole lot of it. We don't get around to it. If we get too busy, we try to use them as fast as we can until they're gone, and then they're gone. Otherwise, I mean, we add them to dishes to preserve them, or simply like we like to do at the restaurant, I do at home sometimes. If you have a bunch of herbs, a lot of those times those herbs will go really well together. We'll just simply process them or just chop them up and add them to some olive oil, and then they'll hold for a couple weeks in your fridge, and then we can just add that to as like a base to, if you want to add it to some soups or add it in a salad or add a marinade or in a dish, or like you said, like rice.
Yeah, I know a lot of people will make their own pesto. They'll do up a batch of pesto and then they'll just freeze it in ice cube trays or something like that, just to kind of have those handy that you can pop out. Well, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, more talking with Ryan Nitschke.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Okay, we're back with Ryan Nitschke talking about food from the garden being put into restaurants. Ryan runs Luna Fargo and oversees a number of other restaurants around town. So your restaurants serve a lot of food from different cultures. You're really inspired by all of the foods that are out there. But I want to see, how does what's grown locally influence the food that you cook and the food that you present to your restaurants?
Well, very much so influences, especially Luna. Since its beginning, almost a decade ago, we've the whole focus has been seasonal food and always produce driven. So it's what the farmers are dropping off, or we even have people in the neighborhood that are always just dropping off what they have excess of, and it's fun to always have this ability to change the menu whenever we want, and that's what people come to expect, that they can have something different when they come in, and have that be based on what we're getting in. We might not get 100 pounds of one product. We might just get 5 pounds of sunchokes or something, and we got to figure out what to do with that, and we do one dish with that until it's gone, and then start with the next vegetable that came in.
So it's not all planning. Sometimes it's problem solving, and that the problem is what do you have on hand and how are you going to make it work?
Yeah, it's like a game of Chopped, or like the show Chopped on there.
Is that, I know that sometimes for chefs, there can be a lot of burnout in a kitchen, but does something like that, the aspect of that, the challenge, the daily challenge of what you've got and how do you make it work, does that kind of help keep things going, help keep you interested and invigorated?
It really keeps the juices flowing, but it allows us to, we want all of our team to get involved in what we do. We want them to be inspired as well. So it gives everyone a chance to collaborate and give some of their ideas. Like, hey, what are we going to do? We got 10 million pounds of squash now here in fall. What are we going to do with all this squash? What's going on? But
so I suppose it could work both ways. When one of your suppliers says we have a lot of this, whether it's squash, onions, kale, or whatever, I suppose they could come to you and say, we have a lot of this, but does it also work the other way, that you tell them we could use more of something? Can you grow more of something?
Yeah, we talked to them at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, about, and throughout the season, but about what they plan on growing and what we like cooking with and what we want to use. So they're very heavily influenced by that, and then it's whatever pops up, whatever is growing well this season.
Sure, because each season varies.
Yeah,
so I bet that keeps it interesting as to what's going to be plentiful.
Yeah, and we want to support our farmers, and our local growers. So we take some of the stuff what they have. We take some of the ugly stuff too, because you can still make it taste good. It still tastes good and always look good at the farmers market. So we take it.
So what things are you seeing now? What's coming in now? What are you working with right now?
It's getting end of the summer season here, so we still have lots of tomatoes, lots of zucchinis, still getting lots of corn. And I love this time of the year, the end of the summer and the beginning of fall. It's that's when it's overabundance of produce. It's kind of that's when we can really get creative with all of the.
There's a lot to choose from, isn't there?
Yeah. So the menu gets more interesting and gets a lot of fun. If you look at spring, when it's asparagus season, you might see asparagus on 5 dishes. So you get to then you get to fall. We got lots of stuff to choose from. We're doing all sorts of stuff. You get a little down the road into wintertime, it's what's left. How are these squash and root vegetables holding up? But
you talked a little bit about zucchini, and obviously around here, that's always a big joke. Is that if you're not careful and you don't lock your doors, someone's gonna leave you a zucchini. What do you do with when you get an overabundance even of zucchini?
Yeah, so sometimes when I get home from work, there's a new zucchini sitting on the counter. It probably came from one of my family's gardens. We like to, it's as cliche and kind of fun as it is, just make some zoodles. It's kind of a silly name for it, but it is exactly that. Just julienne some spaghetti shaped out of the zucchini and summer squash, and you can just treat it like a cooked pasta, saute it up with, I like to do a little bacon, garlic, Parmesan, throw an egg on top, or at home it's great to add that with some other vegetables and a soy-based glaze, some chicken, make a little stir fry with some zoodles.
And that's a relatively, again, that may have been around for a while, but around here we didn't see that until fairly recently.
It's pretty easy, and I know everybody's zoodling at home, I feel like.
Oh, do you really? Do you think that
I think people are zoodling. New word, another new word.
Another new word,
I don't know if I made that up
because
or not.
I have not eaten or done that. So a new challenge. I need to do that.
What do you do with zucchinis?
Well, okay, what's going through my mind, my favorite still is sautéed, young tender zucchini, sautéed with butter and salt.
Oh, okay.
That's still my favorite.
Sometimes the simplest is the best.
Gosh, the blend of the butter and salt.
With this being kind of the harvest season, have you ever experimented much with canning or pickling?
We do some pickling, a lot of pickling, but mostly like fresh pickling. Like we don't do a lot of canning. I've never sat down and learned the art of canning. We're lucky to have freezers and freezer space, so we do process and freeze a lot of stuff at home and at work. But yeah, it's canning. Haven't done it, but pickle all sorts of vegetables. I mean, we got a pickle plate at Luna, so we're always have like 4 to 5 house-made pickles in whatever vegetable. So some vegetables are not meant for pickling always, but.
You were saying that you have locally sourced farmers or locally sourced produce from farmers in the area, but then even people from the neighborhood will bring in things. I mean, besides zucchini, what might be some things that people from the neighborhood are bringing around?
A lot of tomatoes.
Okay.
A lot of times they'll just drop up that. Early on in the year, we'll just get bags of rhubarb everywhere, which I love that. Like, we don't have to buy rhubarb most of the time.
What dishes do you use rhubarb in? I'm curious.
It's fun. I mean, obviously rhubarb crisp that's on our menu when it's rhubarb season.
Oh, wow.
It goes until you can't pick it anymore. We do like a ginger pickled rhubarb, so it almost like that, like pickled ginger you get at like a sushi restaurant, but it's like we add ginger to like a very thinly shaved rhubarb. But even like a quick little saute in a savory application is great.
Yeah, because I always tend to think of rhubarb as used in sweets, because you want to use some sugar in there to kind of offset that a little bit. Pie, certainly, yeah. I mean, exactly. Crisp pies, bars, things like the muffins, things like that. So you're talking about like using it in other dishes too throughout the whole menu.
Yeah. Sometimes it's great we did a dish once where we just sliced it real thin on a bias, and we have a ton of cucumbers as well, and we'll slice that up and people don't always think of cucumber sauteed up, but sometimes those sauteed up really quick with a little salt, pepper, and butter. It adds a nice complement to another dish. But
I think it's so awesome that you're using rhubarb like that, because rhubarb is just such a staple, kind of a northern, it's just kind of a northern homegrown. Everything is right with the world if you have rhubarb.
Right? I know, I feel the same way. It's like, it's kind of like the zucchini on your counter when you get home. Sometimes when I get to work, there's like a new bag of rhubarb waiting for me when it's in season. Everybody's got it, like everybody at work, and my parents got it. If I'm really hurting for it, I go to their house and grab it.
We talked about zucchini being like maybe like, there's another one. Is there anything that people drop off that you're always like, yes, you will always take more of? I mean, you talked about how much you love tomatoes. Yeah. You love all kinds of tomatoes.
I love tomatoes and just the many, many, like, just vast different types of tomatoes. And we can always find uses to process them and to save them, to use them throughout the colder months. And always those. We find people some people get creative with some of the herbs they choose, like that, and they don't know what to do with them. And it comes at the end of the season and they don't know how to process them either. So we'll get big bags of various herbs, and we love getting that, because I mean, we don't grow any in the restaurant, but we get a lot from my house or some other families and some local providers. But if somebody in the neighborhood they have an overabundance of herbs, like, we'll take them and we'll find a use for them.
Does anybody ever surprise you with something that they've brought in?
Some anise hyssop is kind of an interesting thing. Lemon balm and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, we just treat it like many varieties of basil, which I love. There's a lot of interesting ones, or the many different flavors of thyme they're doing now. And stuff like that. So,
and sage, some of the different flavors of sage.
How about like hot peppers? Do people bring in you hot peppers?
Yeah. We got some guys that we even work in the company that. When your plant is going well, you have a lot of chili peppers, and nobody necessarily needs a lot of chili peppers.
So if there's an unknown pepper brought to you, do you kind of sample it a little to see how hot, what it might be?
I'll always take a bite of it first. Take a big old bite and see how it goes.
Do you have your glass of milk right next to you already?
That's what I was thinking, John, too. Yeah. Do you have the milk
usually
candy?
Usually that secondary, like, quick run to the fridge and grab the milk. But. And then somebody recently last year brought me, and I don't know how I feel about it, but it's the nada pinos and the not habaneros or whatever, like they have the flavor and the look of those peppers with zero heat.
Without the heat.
But I feel like they don't taste as good anymore because you took a big piece of what they are.
Well, yeah, that heat kind of complements the flavor in many ways.
So then you're like looking someone dead in the eye and you take a big old bite of a jalapeno and just chew it without even flinching. You're like, no, you're just basically eating a bell pepper at that point.
I was going to say, yeah, do you feel like just like chomping on a big bell pepper?
Right, that's basically it. But.
You talked a couple minutes ago about being able to use the tomatoes that you get kind of through winter. How do you do that? How do you store tomatoes? Because obviously they don't freeze well necessarily as a tomato. You don't want to freeze a whole tomato. But how do you do them? How do you prepare them?
My wife does a lot of the cooking in the house. I'm at work cooking. So, but we always have at home we'll have an overabundance of tomatoes, and she likes to just cook them into a tomato sauce, and we'll freeze it in Ziploc bags or then turn it into soup, or you add it to pasta later. Easy to do at the restaurant. We can do a similar thing, or sometimes we like to make like we take what's left of like the basil. That's like if the basil's starting to brown a little bit, or some tomatoes that don't always look as good, we throw a little bit of garlic and a little bit of gelatin, and we throw it in a pot, and we let that kind of just the juices come out naturally of the tomatoes. Not overcook it, but just let everything bloom and the juices come out, and let the gelatin kind of bloom in there as well. And then we can freeze that, and that's becomes something that we just sits in our freezer. We put it on some cheesecloth when we pull it out of the freezer, and it slowly strains this very clear, very concentrated, intense tomato flavor, and we add that to dishes as a broth to like wow people. Like
that's a real smart. Yeah, that's a really fun use.
You got the Ziploc bags. You can layer those in your freezer. Like
just freeze them flat and then stack them up. Yeah. When you were talking about things that people from the area will bring in, just not necessarily your vendors, but I'd heard did you ever know Frank Knox? Or did you ever hear? So this was I think 20 years ago, but a friend of mine who cooked at the country club, they said that this guy Frank Knox would come around and he would bring in boxes of garlic that he had grown, and he was kind of dependable for that. He always like good garlic, and he would bring it by. But I was like, garlic. Do you get a lot of garlic in? It's because it's not necessarily as popular up here, but
no. Occasionally we get some people that like I grow too much garlic. How much garlic do you need at home? So then they we'll get some garlic for some people, or even like a farmer we just got this message probably about, I don't know, a little less than a month ago with a picture with a giant box of garlic. She's like, we have so much garlic that needs a home. Will you just take it? And I'm giving it away to chefs. So, I mean, yeah, we see that definitely.
So when you get so much garlic in, what do you make plans for specific dishes, or do you kind of roast it and then being able to kind of hold on to it that way a little bit, or you just kind of hope it'll hold?
We do a little bit of everything. It's all hands on deck. When you got a spare moment, everybody's peeling garlic. It's fun, right? And then, we use a lot of fresh garlic, so it'll hold for a while in the fridge. And then we also roast a ton of it, and then we're able to just freeze that. And whenever we need add a roasted garlic to an aioli or a quick little addition to soup or a sauce, it's just ready and stacked up in the freezer.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more with Ryan Nitschke.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from Inforum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at Inforum.com.
All right, we're back, and we're talking with Ryan Nitschke from Luna Fargo and a number of other local restaurants, all of which you should check out. So, Ryan, we're transitioning from summer to fall. We've been talking about this, and you said you really like this, that there's an abundance of all this food coming in. But do you have a favorite season to cook in? I mean, does one pop out? Because I'm sure that there are some pluses to all different kinds, but
I think fall, it's something with the cool air and the warm pot in the house cooking, that you walk in the house and either you got that roast cooking or you got something in the crock pot, like the soup cooking, that smell. I mean, it's all about the fall, just the
True. That is awesome. Good description.
Do you have favorite fall dishes? I mean, do you have things that you've been? So in my house, Sam really likes soups, and in the summer, I just don't think it's soup season. So now she's been very excited that we're going ahead. We made chili last night. But do you have certain fall dishes that you're always looking forward to that right about now that you're looking to prepare or have at home?
I think you said soup. That's where I got was able to develop my palate a little bit back at the Hotel Donaldson, was making soups and being creative and being able to fail there a little bit here and there. But I love soup definitely in the fall time. Playing around with squash definitely in the fall time. Like that with squash, definitely a spaghetti squash, one of my favorites. You just kind of roast it and you fork the strands out and you treat it like pasta too, or like mix it with Parmesan and what's left of those fresh herbs and toss in the oven. Such a simple dish, but it's just so good.
And squash is particularly utilitarian. I mean, I remember we would have it on the steps into the basement. That's where my parents would keep it, a cooler area, and the basement wasn't finished, so it wasn't necessarily a lot of traffic going on down there. But it kept them safe, kept them out of the way, and kept them kind of cool. The squash will stick around for a while.
Do you have a favorite type of squash?
Spaghetti squash is up there, but I also love. I love all squash. I'm lucky. I get plenty of squash. There's squash. Obviously, there's squash everywhere. But I love delicata squash. It's like almost like sweet potato like flavor, and it's got that thin skin that you can is edible, and you just carve it out and slice it up. And we use it at the restaurant. I use it at home if I need like a quick like side dish for somewhere. It's like easy popular dish where you can just toss it with some like oil, salt, and pepper, throw it in the oven and roast it, and then you can add whatever you want on top of it. You like a little agrodolce, a little like kind of a sweet sour type sauce, or a little balsamic. Yeah.
Do you like the stuffed squashes? Or the stuffing with squashes?
Yeah. I mean, I don't typically like stuffed squashes. Like, don't typically do that a lot, but usually we'll make like a mash or a hash or soups like butternut squash and apple soup is always something that graces the menu in this time of year.
Do you have not necessarily a secret or a trick, but do you have tips for like what helps make a good soup?
Save all your veggie scraps, make a little vegetable stock. I think it's a really good thing. Squash, definitely roast it first. I've heard some people, some chefs, they'll peel it and throw the raw one in there. I'm like, that's the hard way, and you're missing out on some of the flavor you get from roasting in the oven first. So I think a little oil, salt, and pepper, just roast that squash, half the squash, core it out a little bit, and just let it roast in the oven, get some color, get some flavor in there, browning, and then add that. It's easier to scoop it out of the thick skin too,
Because in fall, obviously, there's a lot of root vegetables too. What are some of the things you like to do with root vegetables? Carrots, turnips, parsnips, things like that. What do you?
It's fun to shave them thin and fry them up, and we do a little mix of like chips or so as like a little garnish or like a dish. Like you mix that with some microgreens, and it's like a fun little like chefy way that people are like, oh, but yeah, that's an easy thing too. It's really fun. Like doing just like treat them a lot of the time like a potato. Like we'll shave them thin and make like a little pave or a dauphinoise, or like, which is basically like almost like au gratin. Like you're just slicing it thin and layering it with butter and herbs and cream and all that good stuff, and you roast it in the oven, and you got this nice layered of just different root vegetables in there.
I've heard of pave. What was the other word you used?
Dauphinoise.
Dauphinoise, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar same thing.
I suppose different cultures have kind of the same approach to a dish, which is layering cream are in there, and then
it's casserole. It's hot
casserole,
dish, basically. That's what it is.
Do you have Luna? You all have been in all the restaurants, have been very active in the Drecker Hot Dish Festival. Do you have a favorite hot dish? We're getting a little away from the garden, but do you have a favorite hot dish since we brought it up?
I don't know. I'm pretty easy. I eat everything. Just throw some browned hamburger and a bunch of vegetables in there. That's good with me.
Well, speaking of eating everything, you have kids. Sometimes it's hard to get kids to eat their vegetables. I was one of those kids. Is it hard for you and your wife to get the kids to eat vegetables, or have you have you worked with them to try to appreciate it a little bit more? Because you were talking about, in your own backyard growing up, just being able to, it was kind of a playground in a way, being able to run into the garden and snap up something that maybe you weren't supposed to have, but forbidden fruit.
I think that first off, kids are pretty smart. They know, like they know what they like and what they don't like. They're going to see it right away. I've noticed with my kids, like they know the difference between like a store-bought like frozen Brussels sprout, and which is just not the greatest thing ever, versus a fresh Brussels sprout where you add some bacon or whatever and they add something else they like to it. But I think mainly it's like the rest of us in the restaurant world, like kids eat with their eyes as well. So I mean, keep it simple and identifiable for them. It worked with my kids, so they know what they're eating and it's familiar to them. And then add one of their favorite ingredients ever, which is sugar. But find interesting ways, like take some carrots and add a little honey and maple syrup to it. Like I said, like the stir-fried vegetables, you add a little bit of sweet soy kind of or teriyaki sauce to it. They'll eat it right up. But oddly enough, my kids love broccoli just on its own, so I feel lucky there.
Yeah, my grandkids too. It's interesting too. If kids see the connection between where it's grown, such as in the garden or backyard, the connection between it being grown and eating it seems to make that connection that gives a little extra flavor or fun to it too, versus something that maybe was bought off the grocery store shelf.
No, you're exactly right, because I could see it in my 4-year-old when he goes out to my in-laws' garden and he gets to pick something and then he gets to bring it home and he's like, I want to eat this. I want to eat this tomato. I want to cook this. I want to eat it. So that's like key right there. If they can be a part of the process, like he's probably going through that feeling that I had when I was a little kid, that like, wow, like this just comes out of this plant or the ground. And
you mentioned Brussels sprouts as a great example of something that's store-bought, frozen versus fresh, or from seeing from the garden. So just Brussels sprouts we never had growing up. Apparently my dad didn't like them. So one year for Christmas, my mom would wrap Brussels sprouts in tinfoil and put them in our stockings as a kind of a gag gift, as a joke. I've come to really like them later in life. And I think that it's another food that I think we're seeing kind of maybe not necessarily having a moment, but it's come into a little bit more popularity. And you've used them a lot in your restaurants. And how do you take a food that maybe some people would be like, roll their eyes at or not do, and really make them kind of like a restaurant staple or a menu staple? I mean, is it just as simple as cooking them with bacon?
That's an easy one for sure. Bacon and a little sweet glaze on top is always good. I have a similar story with my father, but like my mom cooking him frozen Brussels sprouts and him just making the face of when you'd see a little kid yuck face, versus him eating some from our restaurant, which, I mean, deep frying everything, they say, makes it taste good, right? So, but fried Brussels sprouts has been really trendy and really good. It's really worked out at Soul Avenue Kitchen. Just like you take the fresh, you don't even have to cook it. You just throw it right in the fryer. It just pops, and then the key is not to over fry it, and so it still has some of that fresh in the inside, but it's warm through, and then it's just topping it with fun stuff that like kind of just the flavors that people enjoy. I don't know.
Well, and then another one that Soul in particular has done a lot of, I'm not sure if you've done it at the other places, but we've talked about this a couple weeks ago, shishito peppers. And shishito peppers are a real nice thing. And was that a new one to you, Don?
It was, yeah. I've not grown that.
Yeah, and so just talk a little bit about how you do shishito peppers and what they are.
Yeah, they're so easy. They're so fun. They're just like little wrinkly green peppers. They have almost like a chili-like flavor, but there's no heat to them. They say like 1 in every 10 or 12 will be hot if you're lucky. I like to get like one hot one out of the mix, but they're so thin-skinned as well, and there's very few seeds in there, so it's like real easy, just a quick blister, like saute in a pan, like very briefly, or you can throw them on the grill, like very briefly, just a little oil, salt, and pepper, and then you can top them with whatever we like. We love doing that at Soul. Like when we get some farmers growing them for us, they ask if we like them, and they're like, yeah, we'll grow more for you next year. So they sell really good in the restaurant because it's a unique ingredient that people that aren't as familiar with, but it's a really tasty ingredient.
So it's a fun thing. And then when people are thinking about going out to eat, I mean, they should look ahead and see like what's on the menu, because in your restaurants, like you were saying, you try to be seasonal, you try to work with what's available and what's plentiful at that time.
You know, during our entire discussion here, my mouth has been watering because as you described the flavors and the methods of cooking, and it's based on fresh vegetables and fresh produce. And as I was thinking about that and my mouth watering, it reminded me of the importance of that key ingredient, the fresh vegetables. You know, I know a person could use shipped-in material, but a lot of this depends on those flavors and the intensity and the freshness of that. So I think it's amazing.
Well, and not only that, but also like what Ryan was just saying, like developing that, you know, with the kids or with anybody really, with seeing the fruits of your labor and seeing something kind of come into being. You know, I enjoy it from just as an aesthetic thing, just watching plants grow and things like that. But when you're able to pull it and eat it and you know where it's coming from and you bring it into the house and you prepare it, it tastes better and you appreciate it more and makes you want to grow more again next year.
And I think it's amazing to see restaurants doing this because it's got to be more work, you know, more fun work, I would think, but it's got to be more work than just picking some frozen stuff that's shipped in off a truck and using it to prepare foods. This has got to be more work, but got to be more fun. But man, what a wonderful trend in restaurants to be doing this. And what a wonderful trend for us to go to eat it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is awesome to be offered food like this that we can have.
There's many restaurants in town too. It's not just us. Our restaurants, we always had this model that was ingrained into me, my time at the Hodo, and there's many restaurants in town that are getting fresh produce locally.
So what a great trend for us consumers.
Yeah, really. It's a great time to
Great time to be an eater.
Yes, it is a great time to be an eater for sure. And now that, especially now that we're in fall here, we've been talking about all this great kind of wonderful food, these aromas that'll be coming up, and yeah, I'm excited to go out and eat.
I am too, boy. And you've painted a nice picture, Ryan. I could almost taste these things as you described, let alone smell.
So you have a big wine dinner coming up at Luna Fargo. Talk a little bit about that, and will there be some, because the wines will be coming from Oregon, right? As I understand, yeah. Willamette Valley. Yeah, and so, but will you be incorporating some local flavors as far as some local vegetables or herbs into the dishes that you'll be pairing with the wines?
Yeah. So the dinner is next Wednesday, the 20th. So. Wine dinners like this is a chance to get even weirder than we already are and experiment more and maybe even find new dishes. But it's also a way of using some of those. We don't get large amounts of one vegetable or this or that, you know. So it's nice to be able to use some of this stuff. But yeah, it feels like fall. So I'm treating this dinner like fall because we are getting some of that. Then there's going to be some roasted beets on the menu, and some other vegetables in there we're working in, but.
Yeah, and at Luna, you do a fair amount of these wine dinners or beer dinners or different kind of mixing of spirits and food. So I think people should keep an eye out for that. You know, keep an eye out on the Facebook page. If you go to the place, look for posters, look for different posts about it, and they're always a lot of fun. Well, I think that's going to do it for the show. Don, if people have questions for you about their garden, what's the best way to reach you?
Feel free to email me. The email address is donald.Kinzler, spelled Kinzler, at ndsu.edu.
And Ryan, thanks again for coming in. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you and a lot of fun to hear about your approach to food and the restaurant's approach to food and the approach to the garden that you take there.
Yeah, it's great being here and meet
great visiting with you, Ryan.
Yeah, great talking. So yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
All right, we'll see you all next week.